If you've owned your Nintendo Switch for more than, say, 6 months, you've probably came to the realization that any Nintendo first-party game rarely goes on sale or drops below like $50 even when it does, and maybe $40 at best on, say, Black Friday. Games like Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, despite being quite old, really hold their value. Same with the Pokemon titles. So I'll start this video off by saying if you really want a Pokemon game, even something as old as Sword and Shield or the more recently released Violet, for instance, just simply buy it at close to full price because that's probably what you're going to expect to pay. But if you venture outside of the Nintendo-made games to other Nintendo Switch games, you can find some deals, and obviously game prices do fluctuate fairly regularly. So depending on when you're watching this video, the prices may have changed, but I tried to pick games that seem like they're on a downward trajectory in terms of price. The price just seems to be increasing. I don't expect the price to suddenly jump up. For some unknown reason, though, it could. So these are my favorite games coming in around $20, again, depending on where you bought it. I tried to use GameStop as a good rule of thumb on price, but you can probably find these games on Amazon or eBay for similar prices. These are going to be second-hand prices. If you walk into Walmart or Target, you may pay a little bit more, but again, I don't expect these to be full-price games. So without extending this introduction any longer, let's jump into 10 games that are around about $20 on the Nintendo Switch. And of course, these are going to be physical copies, and maybe you can find even a better deal if you look digitally on the eShop. But I like to say try and get the physical copies of these Nintendo Switch games since they do hold their value relatively well, and you can probably always resell it for at least $10 or more. Mario Plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle is of course the first game on this list. This one's been out for, honestly, I think a handful of years, and just received a sequel like a month ago. This game has been notoriously cheap for quite some time, as there just seems to be a ton of copies out there. Doesn't mean it's a bad game, but it's not going to appeal to everybody. It's a turn-based strategy game where you're moving around a grid, think XCOM or Fire Emblem style, and because of that, it's not a traditional Mario game in the way that, a kid might look at the cover and think that it's going to be, and in that way I can understand how maybe a kid that got this thinking it'd be a traditional Mario experience was thoroughly disappointed when they found out it was a turn-based game. But if you're into turn-based strategy games, you know what you're getting into, this is a very good one. SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated is an action platformer game that is just a remake of SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, which released on the PlayStation 2, original Xbox, and GameCube back in the day. This is a game that people really enjoyed, and while the Nintendo Switch version is not perfect in a technical sense, and you'd probably have a better experience playing this on other platforms, as is going to be the case with any of these games that are released across multiple platforms, the Nintendo Switch version does a good enough job, and as a SpongeBob game is something that's going to be very enjoyable for kids even all these years later, as it has aged, I think, relatively well in the action platforming genre. Then Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2, that's both games in one package. This is something that retailed like $40 new initially. I did buy it on my Xbox One back when it launched. Came out a little bit later on the Nintendo Switch, but still a good time. I mean, all these years later, the 1990s games of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1+2, or 1 and 2, I suppose, are still very enjoyable, and the fact that you can even do 2-player on the Nintendo Switch, I think is really cool that they were able to implement that on, what's obviously a little bit lesser powered system. So these games are still a good time, very faithful to the originals, and definitely something that you can just have a great time with playing free skate or even just the regular career mode. And how about Immortals Phoenix Rising, another Ubisoft game that they seem to run on sale relatively frequently. This is it's not an Assassin's Creed game, and it's not as violent as an Assassin's Creed game, thus its teen rating, but it has a lot of the feel and the action sense of one of those Assassin's Creed games of more recent years, like Odyssey. It has a lot of Greek mythology in it, and if you're interested in Greek mythology, I guess this is a good way to learn about it, but as kind of an action RPG, this is a larger game that you can really sink your teeth into, and for less than $20, which it seems to consistently go for, particularly used at GameStop, I think it's definitely worth a look. And then really almost any LEGO game on Switch, with the exception of maybe the Skywalker Saga, can be purchased for around $20. These games are a great value considering the wealth of content that's in each LEGO game and the fact that they have a lot of local multiplayer elements, as all these games can be played all the way through with local multiplayer. I'm showing Lego Incredibles here because I think that's one of the most unique ones that's often forgotten. The fact that they had the Incredibles license back when Incredibles 2 came out to make this game, I think is really cool, but there's obviously tons of superhero ones, Harry Potter, and just a ton of different options if you're looking for a Lego game. Digimon Story CyberSleuth, the complete edition, is really 2 PlayStation Vita games in one, sort of the full package, and you get to see the story from 2 points of view. In a similar sense to Pokemon, you run around a overworld and you go into turn-based battles, fighting your Digimon against others. This game is very story-heavy, especially when compared to Pokemon, and that won't appeal to everybody, nor will the Digimon themselves or their branching evolution paths. But if you grew up with Digimon, I recommend taking a look at this one if you haven't in the few years since it's been out. Minecraft Dungeons takes a serious turn from the traditional Minecraft format and introduces a sort of Diablo-like game where you have a top-down camera and you're moving through dungeons, battling and collecting loot. It's something that can be really enjoyable, especially for younger kids that are fans of Minecraft, but it's a very accessible way of playing a Diablo sort of game where you wouldn't want to necessarily have them play Diablo, but this is much more accessible, and with the tons of different loot that there is to unlock, a really enjoyable time. This came out across a slew of platforms, the Switch just being one of them, and I think is definitely worth a look because it also has local multiplayer. Hot Wheels Unleashed might be no Mario Kart, but it is definitely a good time. I played this a lot last fall as I just had an awesome time unlocking different miniature cars, and the way in which you unlock them is relatively random. You can buy some on a rotating option from the store, but you really need to buy the rest of them from just sort of grab bags, and you're getting them at random, which I actually found to be very enjoyable in a game that didn't have microtransactions. You're buying them with in-game currency, and I had a fun time working my way across this board and finishing the game's, I guess, quote-unquote story mode. I've not seen a ton of physical copies of this one for sale, but I think it's worth its inclusion because it is a very good deal if you can track one down. Maybe that just comes down to ordering it online, but there's a Star Wars Racer and Commando combo for the Nintendo Switch. You're getting the Star Wars Racer game from back on like the Dreamcast, as well as Star Wars Republic Commando, which came out on the original Xbox. Both those games not really remastered in the fact that the graphics don't look better, but they're ported forward to the Nintendo Switch, and getting both of them for around $20-$25 is a great deal, considering that these are both classic Star Wars games in their own right, one being a racer and the other one being a first-person shooter. And lastly, Burnout Paradise, an open world racing game, kind of in that Need for Speed type format. I compared it to actually a Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 here about a month ago. This game is really one of the only open world racers on the Nintendo Switch, and though it originally started as an Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 game, its inclusion here is because it's aged very well, put it that way, and I think that it holds up well today as far as comparing it to other realistic racing games on the Nintendo Switch. The cars in this game aren't from actual car manufacturers, but they do have a realistic look. This is no Mario Kart, it is no Hot Wheels. This is realistic of a racing game as you're going to get on the Nintendo Switch, unless you step into something like Grid. So those are my picks for some of the best Nintendo Switch games, around $20, maybe $25, depending on where you buy them. And of course, like I said, those prices I'm sure will fluctuate over time, but these are all games that are a great value for what they are. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video.